Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Americas. Here's a look at what's coming up in today's show. As Donald Trump lines up a new immigration agreement with Mexico after pressuring it with tariffs, we'll take a look at just how the U.S. president makes a deal. Then the U.S. team is plowing its way through the Women's World Cup here in France. Selena Sykes takes a closer look at the Americans fighting to defend their football cup title. And a D-Day romance reignited 75 years after the Normandy landing of World War II. A look at the love story between an American soldier and a French girl on the way. I'm Jeannie Godula. Donald Trump claimed victory this week after putting pressure on Mexico over the migrant crisis. Mexico caved to threats of new tariffs on their exports to the U.S., promising to up its control of migrants heading across the border. But the U.S. president inadvertently revealed some details of his immigration deal with Mexico by waving the paper in front of journalists' faces and their cameras. That bullying and bluster, all part of the president's self-proclaimed art of the deal. And while negotiating is part of the job for most heads of state, Trump's talks with China, North Korea, Iran, or even with allies like Europe are a battle. His goals are to bring back business to the U.S. and neutralize the nuclear threat. But experts are divided on whether or not Trump's tactics help or hurt.
China, North Korea, Iran, Mexico, Canada, and Europe. No matter who's on the opposite side of the negotiating table and what's at stake, President Trump has a similar tactic. It starts aggressively, like with North Korea.
They will be met with fire and fury.
Then comes a phase of apparent reconciliation.
We fell in love, okay? No, really. He wrote me beautiful letters.
A deliberate tactic that Trump also used in his business deals before becoming president.
It's the Trump methods. I try to scare people first. I only start negotiating from a favorable position. I start talking when I feel my opponent is weak enough. When he's weak, he's easier to convince.
But does the method work in diplomacy? Donald Trump had 2 summits with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. They still have no deal. Some see this as a failure. Others believe Trump has neutralized Pyongyang.
President Trump continues to say that because North Korea has not done a nuclear test or a long-range ballistic missile test, that he's okay with that.
With Iran, Trump has failed to engage in new dialogue after dropping out of the nuclear deal.
What they should be doing is calling me up, sitting down, we can make a deal, a fair deal.
But Iran has no intention of following that advice.
In his conception of the art of the deal, pressure, then bring the party to the negotiating table under pressure. This may work in a real estate market. It does not work in dealing with Iran.
Trump's biggest battle is over trade with China. His tariff hikes have indirectly hit U.S. farmers and businesses, but some believe they've also weakened China.
It would be surprising to say that China is dependent on anybody, but vis-a-vis the U.S., it is coming into the negotiations from a weaker perspective, and I think Mr. Trump understands that leverage that he has.
Future talks will tell if that leverage helps Trump clinch a deal.
Brazil Justice Minister Sergio Moro is facing heat in the wake of a leaked message scandal. Those messages, leaked by website The Intercept, raised doubts about his impartiality as the judge overseeing landmark corruption cases, including the one that sent former President Lula to jail and kept him from running for president again. Moro will appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee next week to explain the leaked messages that show him making suggestions to the lead prosecutor in that case about the investigator's work. The pressure on Moro and federal prosecutors is expected to increase. At least one influential newspaper has already called on him to resign. And Nicaragua says it has released 56 political prisoners under a new amnesty law that frees people who were arrested in recent anti-government protests while protecting police and others who violently clamped down on the demonstrations. Nicaragua's opposition has made the release of political prisoners a condition of dialogue with the administration. But under the law, those former prisoners are banned from participating in more anti-government protests. The UN's top human rights official, as well as local opposition groups, have blasted the legislation as a way to grant impunity to those who committed abuses during the violent crackdowns. The Women's Football World Cup is on now in France, but all eyes were on the defending triple champions from the U.S. this week. The Americans recorded the biggest ever victory in the Cup as they crushed Thailand 13-0. Selena Sykes has been keeping a close eye on the U.S. team. She joins me now on the set for more. Selena, the U.S. really couldn't have asked for a better start to their campaign.
Certainly not, Jeannie. 13 may be an unlucky number for some, but it definitely isn't for Team USA. It's a record-breaking goal tally. In fact, not just in the Women's World Cup, but in any World Cup. They've also beaten the men's record, which was previously held by Germany, who beat Argentina 11-0 in the World Cup in 2007. More than half of the US team got on the team score sheet, and Alex Morgan scored more goals than any other team so far in the competition, with a total of 5 in just one game. This was really a ruthless performance by the US, and it silenced any doubts that people had before they went into this World Cup. They had a few inconsistent performances this year, but that said, the team won't really be tested until they get out of those group stages.
Yeah, the U.S. has long dominated women's football, or soccer, as they say back in the U.S. Are they still the leaders of the pack?
I would say they're definitely still the team to beat. They've won 3 World Cup titles so far, and very impressively have never finished out of the top 3 since the competition began in 1991. But this year does look to be set to be the most open and competitive Women's World Cup yet. There are quite a few teams that are hot on the US's heels. These include England, Germany, Japan and the Netherlands, and most notably the hosts, France. They're probably the biggest contenders for the US's crown. They have really an incredibly talented squad whose core are made up from players from Lyon who have been dominating European football. They've won 4 Champions League titles in a row now. And in fact, they could be facing, the US and France could be facing each other in the quarterfinals if everything goes as predicted and both teams finish top of their group and they win their last 16 game. They will be facing each other in the quarterfinals.
Now, the US team, of course, has a lot of big personalities, both on and off the pitch.
That is certainly right. I don't have the time to mention them all, but we mentioned earlier star striker Alex Morgan. She's someone that the team can always depend on to score goals, as we saw against Thailand, and she's already well on the way to getting that golden boot this year. And she's actually just as influential off the pitch. She's probably the biggest football or soccer player that the world has ever seen in the women's game, and she's really been leading the way to upping the profile and popularity of women's football. She was also named in the Time magazine's list of most influential people, and she really is a role model for young girls everywhere playing football. And alongside her is midfielder Megan Rapinoe. She's a big playmaker for the team and really ruthless on set plays. And like her teammate Morgan, she's also famous for her activism off the pitch, most credibly for fighting for LGBT rights. And she has previously kneeled during the US national anthem in past games in protest against the Trump administration.
Selena, just very briefly, the players are also fighting off the pitch for equal pay for women soccer players.
That's right. This has got a lot of attention lately. They actually, the women's team launched a lawsuit against the US Soccer Federation, claiming purposeful gender discrimination on the International Women's Day this year. They are far more successful than the men's team, yet they are still paid far less than them. Just one figure for you. In 2015, the US women's team won the World Cup. They were awarded $1.7 million for doing so. And the year before that, the men's team were given $5.4 million for getting knocked out in the last 16. And just another figure, which obviously on Tuesday, when they put 13 goals past Thailand, that's more goals than the US men's team have scored in every World Cup combined since 2006. So they definitely have a case on their hands.
Selena, thank you so much for that look at the U.S. women's team during the World Football Cup here in France. Well, last week, France 24 did a lot of coverage of the 75th anniversary of D-Day with that moving ceremony at the American Cemetery. Well, this week, we've unearthed a remarkable story of wartime romance rekindled 3/4 of a century after the fact. Ahead of the commemorations, our colleagues at French sister station France 2 were in the U.S. talking to some of the war's last remaining veterans. As they were going through an old picture album with a vet named Katie Robbins, one sepia photo caught the journalist's eye, a young French woman. Haxie Myers-Belkin takes a look at what happened next, and you may want to reach for the tissues.
In 1944, Katie Robbins was a young American soldier stationed in northeastern France. One photo from that time stands out.
What's her name?
Jenny. Her name is Jenny Kenney.
You remember her?
I remember her well.
And then the words that will change two lives.
I'd like to go and just see if I can find the family. For sure, I won't ever get to see her. She's probably gone now.
Armed with a photo and the name of a town, it didn't take long to track her down.
She's alive.
Don't kid me. Don't kid me.
And we're gonna meet her.
We're gonna meet her.
Yes. She's alive. And she's waiting for you.
Don't kid me.
Yeah.
Johnny, kid me.
After 75 years apart, they embrace.
Oh, wonderful time to see you, girl.
Ça va?
It doesn't take long for talk to turn to love.
I always loved you. I always loved you. You never got out of my heart.
J'ai toujours pensé à lui, mais en disant peut-être qu'il est là, peut-être qu'il va venir, peut-être.
He shows her the photo he's kept all these years.
This is you.
Wow.
Jenny, I love you, girl.
After a number of hours together, it's time to say goodbye once again.
It's good to see you.
Merci. À bientôt.
You made me cry.
That wraps it up for this Inside the Americas. We'll see you again next week for all the news from north to south.
The world is ever-changing. The news doesn't wait. That's why at France 24, we'll always be there to help make sense of world events. For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what. France 24, with you everywhere, all the time.